Hey everyone, and welcome back to another explainer. If you're a law student, a bar reviewee, or a practicing lawyer joining us today, you are going to want to take notes. We are diving into a truly landmark case in Philippine family law, Chi Ming Tsoi versus the Court of Appeals. Today, we're going to break down this Supreme Court decision using a high-yield IRAC analysis. We'll map out the facts, pinpoint the core legal issues, and really dig into the precise doctrines the court laid down regarding marital obligations. So let's get right into it.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll cover the facts of the case, define the legal issue, look at the evidentiary rules against collusion, unpack how the court defines psychological incapacity, and finally go over the Supreme Court's decision. Okay, let's dive into this. The Supreme Court decision, which was penned by Justice Torres Jr., actually opens with this profoundly human observation. He wrote, "Man has not invented a reliable compass by which to steer a marriage in its journey over troubled waters." It is such a poetic way to set the stage for the conflict we're about to explore. Because, when a marriage fails without any obvious malice, but rather through a profound silent disconnect, how exactly does the law step in? Let's look at the facts that force the court to answer this exact question. Part 1. The facts of the case. The chronological timeline here is absolutely vital. On May 22, 1988, Chi Ming Tsoi and Gina Lao Tsoi got married at the Manila Cathedral. After the reception, they slept in the same bed for their first night, but there was no sexual intercourse. And this pattern just continued. They even went up to Baguio City for a 4-day honeymoon, bringing along some family members, but again, absolutely no intimacy occurred. Fast forward to January 20, 1989, about 8 months into the marriage, the couple submitted themselves to medical examinations. And finally, on March 15, 1989, after exactly 10 solid months of living together and sleeping in the same bed, they separated. And they did so without ever having consummated their marriage. So what was actually happening behind closed doors? Well, the court was presented with a classic he said, she said dynamic. The wife, who filed for the annulment, claimed that as newlyweds, she fully expected them to be intimate. But she said her husband would simply go to bed, sleep on his side, and turn his back to her. She noted he practically avoided her in Baguio by taking long walks or just sleeping in a rocking chair. She actually suspected he might be impotent or perhaps a closet homosexual, claiming he used her makeup, and argued he only married her to maintain his Philippine residency. Now, on the other hand, the husband vehemently denied all of this. He claimed he loved her very much and absolutely did not want the annulment. According to him, she was the one avoiding him, pushing his hands away whenever he made a move. He even testified that he tried to force her once, but stopped because she was shaking and clearly distressed. Now, what's really interesting here is how they tried to figure out what was going wrong. The couple turned to clinical evidence. The wife was examined by a urologist who found that she was entirely healthy, normal, and still a virgin. The husband was examined by a different doctor who specifically tested his physical capabilities. And the medical report showed absolutely no evidence of impotency. The husband was fully capable of an erection and physically capable of having sexual intercourse. So this medical evidence proved one undeniable fact. Neither party suffered from a physical inability to consummate the marriage. The barrier between them was entirely unseen. Which brings us to part 2, defining the legal issue. This is the exact legal question the Supreme Court had to answer. Does the prolonged refusal to have sexual intercourse constitute psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code? Think about it. Since physical capability was definitively proven by those medical exams, the focus shifts entirely away from a physical defect and squarely onto psychological capability. Can a perfectly healthy person be legally incapacitated from fulfilling a marriage? Part 3. Evidentiary rules against collusion. Before getting into the core issue, we have to talk about procedure, because understanding how aggressively Philippine law protects the institution of marriage is crucial here. The husband's lawyers argued that since there was no independent evidence of what happened in the bedroom, ruling on this case was basically relying on confessions, and doing that is illegal. Under the rules of court, specifically Section 1, Rule 19, you literally cannot grant an annulment without a trial. Plus, Articles 88 and 101 of the Civil Code explicitly state that a marriage cannot be annulled based merely on a stipulation of facts or confession of judgment. Basically, couples can't just agree to fake the grounds for an annulment. The material facts always have to be aggressively proved in court to prevent collusion. For all the practitioners out there, this is a vital reminder that the state acts as the ultimate third party in every marriage, fiercely protecting it from fabricated breakups. But here is the fascinating twist the court pointed out. The very fact that this case reached the Supreme Court proved there was no collusion at all. The husband was desperately fighting this annulment. He aggressively appealed the trial court's decision, insisting he loved his wife and wanted to save their marriage. Since the state requires proof that the annulment isn't just fabricated by mutual agreement, by fighting tooth and nail to keep the marriage valid, the husband inadvertently provided the ultimate proof that he and his wife were definitely not working together to fake a case.
Moving on to Part 4, defining psychological incapacity. So the court ruled that one of the absolute essential marital obligations under the family code is the procreation of children through sexual cooperation. But what happens if someone simply refuses? Drawing on Catholic marriage tribunals, the court determined that a spouse's senseless and constant refusal to perform essential marriage obligations, despite being completely physically capable, is actually equivalent to and a clear sign of psychological incapacity. It's not just mere stubbornness. Therefore, a senseless and protracted refusal to have sexual intercourse with your spouse falls directly under this legal framework. And this brilliantly illustrates the court's rationale. Adopting the words of Justice Minerva Gonzaga-Reyes from the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court agreed that such abnormal reluctance or unwillingness to consummate his marriage is strongly indicative of a serious personality disorder. It demonstrates an utter insensitivity or inability to give meaning and significance to the marriage. We're not just talking about a headache here. After 10 months of sleeping in the exact same bed, this extreme level of avoidance crosses the line from a personal grievance straight into a legally recognized personality disorder under Article 36.
Finally, Part 5, the Supreme Court decision. So how did they ultimately rule? The court made a few highly logical deductions based on that 10-month cohabitation period. First, they looked at the wife's motivations. They reasoned that, considering the innate modesty of a Filipino woman, it was highly unlikely she would willingly expose her private life to that kind of public scrutiny and fabricate such an embarrassing testimony unless she desperately needed to put her life in order. Second, the court looked at the husband's primary defense, his claim that it was actually the wife who refused him. The court essentially said, well, if that were true, why didn't you ever try to find out what was ailing her? He never asked what was wrong, never investigated, and never sought medical or psychological help for her alleged resistance. His total inaction made his defense pretty unbelievable. Consequently, the Supreme Court affirmed the decisions of both the trial court and the Court of Appeals, officially declaring the marriage void.
To close out their decision, the court took a surprisingly philosophical stance. They quoted the Latin phrase amor gignit amorem, love begets love. They emphasized that, yes, the law requires a husband and wife to live together and to observe mutual love, respect, and fidelity. But the real driving force for this isn't a legal mandate, right? It's spontaneous mutual affection. The court stated that marriage is for two consenting adults who view their relationship with a continuing commitment to compromise and shared spiritual communion. The cruelest act in a marriage, as the court beautifully noted, is to say, I could not have cared less, because an ungiven self is fundamentally an unfulfilled self. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to ponder today. If a marriage is truly a commitment to compromise and shared intimacy, at what point does deep emotional neglect cross the line from just a bad relationship into a recognized legal void? It is such a fascinating question about the intersection of human psychology and the rigid letter of the law. And that wraps up our digest of Chi Ming Tsoi versus the Court of Appeals. I really hope this structured breakdown was helpful for your studies or your daily practice. If you enjoyed this explainer, please make sure to comment, like, and subscribe for more high-yield legal digests. See you in the next one.